Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Transform Your Board's Fundraising in 90 Days. My name is Yvonne Sims, Network Engagement Manager for Candid based in Atlanta, and I'm joined today by Ebony Carroll, Network Engagement Assistant, also based in Atlanta. We'll be supporting today's webinar behind the scenes, as well as collecting questions you ask along the way and posing them during the Q&A. For those of you joining us for the first time, we want to share with you that we've joined forces with GuideStar to form a new single organization called Candid. Together, we have over 88 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. Every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world, and Candid finds out where that money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. We believe that an effective social sector is critical for a thriving society, and we believe in the importance of solutions for the sector, by the sector. With Candid, nonprofits, foundations, donors, and the public can all be on the same page. Through research, collaboration, and training, Candid connects people who want to change the world with the resources they need to do it. I would now like to turn the controls over to our speaker for today, Sean Kosofsky. And while I do that, I'll introduce you to him. Sean Kosofsky is the nonprofit fixer. He is a coach, consultant, trainer, and strategic advisor to nonprofits. For the past 28 years, he has helped causes, campaigns, and candidates raise millions of dollars and transform nonprofit organizations and leaders. He has served in a wide variety of roles in nonprofits: policy, communications, development, organizer, direct service, boards, and 5 stints as an executive director. He has worked on a wide range of issues, including LGBTQ equality, reproductive justice, voting access, bullying prevention, climate change, and more. His work has been covered in media outlets internationally and has received numerous awards. His work has appeared in blog posts through AFP, Candid, Idealware, Bloomerang, TechSoup, Wild Apricot, and Pamela Grows Motivates Monday, and more. He is an author and the owner of Mind the Gap Consulting. Sean is currently the executive director of Climate Advocacy Lab. He is a proud Detroit native, but lives with his husband and dog in New York. Check out his resources at nonprofitfixer.com. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Sean.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for that warm welcome, and so excited to be here today. Can you see my presentation up full screen?
We can.
Excellent. So thanks again for that. And we are going to talk about board fundraising today. We're going to talk about this really awesome resource called a board agreement today, and how you can move your board in a very short period of time, like 90 days, toward using this tool and fundraising. So a little bit about myself. As was mentioned, I sometimes go as the nonprofit fixer. That's my moniker. I'm a generalist, so I've done a lot of different things in nonprofits. And so one thing I'm really good at, though, is kind of getting into a nonprofit and seeing where there could be improvements or optimization or ways to figure out what's not working so well. So I sometimes just go by the nonprofit fixer, and that's my website, nonprofitfixer.com. I've been in nonprofits for a little over 28 years now. I got my started at the ripe age of 16, working at the YMCA, and then, as was mentioned, sort of went off into civil rights work for a long time, women's work, women's reproductive justice work specifically, and voting rights, and now I'm working in climate change, helping organizations all over the United States working on climate. But my background is also in a number of different areas in the nonprofit space. So political campaigns, charitable advocacy, 501c3, C4, political action committees, all of that, and worked in a number of states: North Carolina, New York, California, Michigan. So I bring a broad sort of experience to this topic. So I've seen like a lot of different things across the sector. And I've been on a bunch of boards myself, so I understand what board service is like, in addition to being an executive director for 5 different nonprofits during my career, including currently. And my business offers courses on fundraising, leadership, board development, executive director work, coaching services, and also just straight out consulting. What you're going to learn today. Today we are going to talk a little bit about what boards are, and also why they need help. because of the fundamental structure of nonprofit organizations and boards. We're going to talk about why board agreements are so powerful and why they are needed in your nonprofit organization and virtually every nonprofit organization. We will also talk a little bit about the elements that go into a board agreement. We will talk about how to implement a board agreement today and how to enforce them. Also, finally, when to review and to amend them. And if you stay till the end, you're going to get a free board agreement today. This is normally something I charge for on my website. That's one of the most frequent tools I use in working with a nonprofit, but if you stick around, you'll get that today. Quick disclaimer, this is a course you're taking. This is a class you're taking. So anytime you get advice from me and try implementing it out in the world, just know that it's just my advice here. So you're taking any kind of risk. I say this at the beginning of all my courses and trainings. So just remember that this is just advice from me that comes with a lot of experience, but also you just need to use some common sense and even talk to internal folks before implementing anything. So your board needs help. All nonprofit boards need help. We're going to talk about this. This sour-faced group of people, clip art, stock photo people that I chose for this, looking suspiciously at you, the executive director or development director, looking for ways to make board meetings better and ways to make board service better. They don't look like a happy bunch, do they? Well, hopefully at the end of this presentation, they're a little happier. Your board needs help. They are made up of volunteers. They are made up of people that largely did not get training in how to be a board member before they were onboarded or chose to take on this leadership role. So in the nonprofit sector, many of us know this, but fundamentally, one of the biggest complaints board members have when they join a board later on is that when they join the board, they never got an orientation. This is fundamental across the sector. This happens everywhere from foundations down to small community organizations. Board members are sometimes afraid to disagree during a meeting, ask questions during a meeting. They don't know how to help out sometimes because they never really got an orientation telling them how things work here. And this is our background. These are our programs that work and those that need work. So all of this different stuff is one of the reasons why board service can be frustrating and why orientations are really, really important. But the board agreement helps us over time address that. Boards are a mess and they have a very bizarre structure. In the corporate world, boards don't work the same way as they do in nonprofits. The fundamental thing that makes nonprofits different than for-profit corporations is that when you bring in money, you don't distribute it to the shareholders, right? So people aren't benefiting from this financially. This is a really weird sort of structure that we've chosen for this sector. But because of that bizarre structure, we know that people are here for impact, not for profit. And so that bizarre structure, though, does lead to some misalignment at times, and we're going to talk about how to fix that today. And they're also unpaid. So it's pretty much against the law in the United States to compensate board members. I think in the foundation world, there might be some ways around that, but you generally can't pay your board members. And so not having that financial incentive makes it tougher to get a board to do what you need them to do at times. But when they are acting, it's out of incredible passion. They're also typically non-experts. Maybe 80 to 90% of board members that serve on nonprofit boards around the country are not experts in nonprofit management at all. And many of them are not experts in the subject matter that they are on the board of. Right, there are exceptions, but the vast majority of people that serve on boards are not subject matter experts either. So we've got this really weird model. The board also has tons of power. What I mean by that is the board owns the nonprofit. And I don't mean own like you own a bicycle or you own a car, but under state law in all 50 states and territories, 50 plus states and territories, the board is the only structure that exists under the law. The executive director doesn't exist. All of the other stuff that exists in a nonprofit might be in the bylaws, it might be on your website, but the only thing that exists legally is that board. They are sort of, under the eyes of the law, the owners of this nonprofit. They have complete power. And that means that you have this group of people that aren't paid, who don't even work there, and they have this weird structure. They're not onboarded, and they can vote to do whatever they want, and they're not subject matter experts. It's like a really, really weird soup of a mess that we sort of talk about in nonprofits. So the old way of dealing with boards and dealing with building boards was to have low standards, right? And so what used to be that, and what many groups still do, is they just round up anyone that can serve. Hey neighbor, hey family member, hey person who works in my office, how would you like to serve on my nonprofit's board? We need a carbon-based, warm breathing mammal to serve on our board who will come to 12 meetings and fundraise. If you'll do, we'll take you. You know, having the lowest possible standards for who can join your board. Many nonprofits operate this way. They just are looking for someone to fill slots, and that's not how you should do it. This leads to low accountability. It really does lead to board members not thinking about the service population or about the staff or about the mission as much as they should. Also, the old way involves no strategy. There isn't really a plan to somehow say, who are we going to put on this board? We need a strategy. We need to reach our mission. The strategy shouldn't just be grab some rich people or grab some people that can attend meetings. There should actually be a strategy, and there should be diversity. The old way is just kind of grabbing whoever's near you who's willing. And we all tend to hang out with people who look and act just like ourselves, which means if you're leading an organization, you're more likely to grab people that look just like you. It might not be with discriminatory intent, but it does lead to homogenous organizations where people start looking alike. And typically in the nonprofit space, that means a lot of white male leadership in nonprofits, people who look like me. And the old way was having that kind of afterthought of diversity. And we really need to be putting strategy and diversity front and center. Also, we talked about this a little bit, and I'll reinforce it here, bad orientation. Most board members aren't getting orientations. They're sort of brought onto the board and told when the first meeting is. And we really need to be giving boards orientations to make sure that they are set up for success leading nonprofit organizations. This leads to low engagement, and it leads to high dysfunction. So we need a new way. The new way, you can see this happy icon there with two big stars in his eyes, is to have high standards. I want to encourage everyone to make sure that the organizations they are with and that they lead have high standards for board service. These are the owners of the nonprofit. When you invite someone to own a nonprofit, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It shouldn't just be, oh, can you please serve? I'm so indebted to you and grateful to you. Of course we should be grateful. But they are giving them a huge level of responsibility, which means we have to expect more of them. It means having a strategy, actually thinking through, why are we building a board? Why do we have this organization? It isn't just to do good work and to do good tactics, it is to reach our mission. So if the goal of creating your organization is to solve a social problem, you should build a board that will help you achieve your mission. This is critical. Too often that is an afterthought. Also, you need to be thinking about division of labor. Who is going to do what? You'll need officers, you'll need committees, and you'll need to have a group of people on the board who have different skill sets. Maybe a lawyer, maybe a CPA, maybe someone who is connected with foundations. But a good division of labor is also really fundamental in running a nonprofit board. Diversity is an advantage. It is not just this thing, oh, look, you know, we look like the community that we serve, or, oh, look, we're trying to get better at being representative. Diversity is a strategic advantage. We're going to talk a little bit here and there about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a broader sort of theme here, but it is about sharing power. It is about making sure that all of our service population, our policies, our employees, and everyone feels like the organization is rowing in one direction toward inclusion, toward equity, justice, and diversity. Accountability. The new way is to make sure that our boards are transparent, that they are accountable to the service population and to the staff and to the stakeholders. That's the new way, instead of having secrecy and insular boards. Also, having thoughtful onboarding. This has a little bit to do with the orientation, but it's the whole process when you're recruiting someone, when you're retaining them, up until the point where you might even need to remove them. But on the onboarding process, being really thoughtful so that they get the information they need to be successful and can help shape the organization's culture. You also want to have fun and productive meetings. I have a bunch of tools on my website, board bingo. I have like a Mad Libs style game for icebreakers too. It's fun and important to keep board meetings fun, to keep them interesting, sometimes educational by doing trainings, but you definitely want to make sure that the new way of board engagement is enjoyable. People join boards partly because they like to network. They like the people that they're hanging out with. Of course, they like the work, but they also need to make meetings enjoyable. See that sour-faced, dour-faced board we had before can be a happy group of high-functioning, well-adjusted, smiling, happy, carbon-based people, and these are now those people. It's actually a different group of people, but these were smiling, so they're inside my deck. So what are boards? Boards are nonprofit corporations. They are still corporations. All organizations incorporated in any state are corporations. So not-for-profit corporations, we talked about, don't distribute the revenue to shareholders. They put it back into program, they can hire staff, but they're not sending it around, emptying the coffers and putting it in their own bank accounts. That's not what boards do. That's not what nonprofits do. States have different rules in every state for how you create, operate, and dissolve a not-for-profit corporation. But at the end of the day, still, it is true what I said, that the board sort of owns the nonprofit in a way. So we have to consider owners of the nonprofit with a very high standard. So we're just reiterating this, that the board, I put in quotes here because they don't really own it legally like you own a bicycle or own a car, but under the eyes of the state, the board has responsibilities. And we're going to talk about this because any owner of any corporation anywhere in the country is responsible for revenue. So if the board owns the nonprofit, and all owners of all nonprofit corporations or all corporations are responsible for revenue, that means nonprofit boards are responsible for revenue. This is jarring for some people to hear. It's not something they've heard before, that my board owns the nonprofit. We're a corporation like any other corporation. Boards are responsible for revenue. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. Also, the biggest challenge for nonprofits isn't fundraising. It's getting a great board. Once you have a functioning board who is aligned and rowing in the same direction and understands why they're there, almost everything else trickles down from that. You can have a high-performing staff and a dysfunctional board, but only for so long. You ultimately are going to need to fix your board. And with the board agreement that we're talking about today, hopefully you can do that in as little as 90 days. So there are three basic parts. I tend to talk about board service in very simple ways. It comes down to three main areas. I have a full course that we're going to talk about later that dives into all of this, but there are the members of the board, the human beings, the people that actually make up the board, right? This is the sweet sauce. This is the actual humans that make up the board of directors or board of trustees. So there's the members, the meetings, and the money. You have the members, which are the people. You have the meetings, which is when boards actually do their best work. When boards come together, that's when they govern. When boards come together, they call the meeting to order, they discuss stuff, they vote, and then they adjourn. But in that period of time where they are meeting and talking and looking at an agenda and doing due diligence and deliberating and hiring and whatever, in those meetings, they have to be high performing. They have to be enjoyable. They have to be good. So board service is about the members. It is also about the meetings because boards don't do that much when they're not meeting. So meetings are critical. And then there's the money coming in, the money going out. And boards ultimately are responsible for that because they own the nonprofit. So the power of agreement. This is what we're talking about today. Agreements are fundamentally important in almost every relationship, whether you're getting married or signing a contract. There are vows, there are agreements, there is alignment. We have agency, we have a say in how we partner with each other. And agreements are the way in which we basically say, let's come together and agree on some terms. It's powerful, it's a fundamental part of how all societies are organized and organizations are organized. So having alignment and agreement is really important. And the same is true for nonprofits. Agreements help establish clarity, what this agreement is and what it is not, what this relationship is and what it is not. Also, it involves reciprocity. I do this, you do this back. That's what an agreement is for. It's also a courtesy. It's a common courtesy to have agreements, right? To be able to state, vocalize, and even write down what we expect from each other in terms of norms or etiquette or politeness or rules of engagement. It's also a little bit of peer pressure. Agreements have power because people are agreeing to something in public. Rarely are agreements completely private, like a handshake, right? Agreements tend to be in the terms of corporate law or contracts. All of these things are discoverable in court. Many of these things are very, very public. New partnerships, most things are sort of public. So when people agree on things, there's some peer pressure that they each are going to adhere to their honor, to their word. And that's why agreements are so powerful for nonprofits. They also hold us accountable. Agreements can help people say, hey, you said you were going to do this. I need to hold you accountable to what you promised, or else we have to have consequences, because we need to be able to trust that people are going to follow through on their word. Accountability is a big part of this. Transparency. You want to have things in writing. You don't want them to be secret. That's why a board agreement can also be visible at the beginning, not as a surprise. And then there's much, much more. Many more reasons why agreements are powerful. Swiss Army knife. So this is going to look familiar. I think a lot of people know what a Swiss Army knife is. Culturally speaking, lots of people in the US and around the world know what a Swiss Army knife is. And the Swiss Army knife, I don't have their legal rights to use their likeness, so this is not my product. I'm not selling this. But the Swiss Army knife is a tool that is known for being compact and small, yet serving many, many purposes. You literally can use a Swiss Army knife for opening things, cutting things, closing things, locking things. It can do a lot of different things. It is fundamentally one of the most iconic things that represents one tool serving many purposes, which is why I call the board agreement a Swiss Army knife tool for nonprofits. So the board agreement really is something in just one document, and it's not some huge contract. It is like 2 to 3 pages. The board agreement is really powerful because it is like a Swiss Army knife. You can impact the engagement level of your board through a board agreement. You can, and engagement means attendance, participating, doing homework, all of that stuff. A board agreement also has to do with the conflicts of interest. So there are a handful of things that are included in a board agreement. Essentially what you're doing, we talked about that handshake, that agreement between two parties. When someone joins the board, they should be signing this agreement, and the organization is also sort of signing the agreement with these individuals on the board. And the elements of these include making sure that they're engaged. If I'm going to serve on this board, I have to be engaged. I have to avoid conflicts of interest while I'm on the board. Doesn't mean you have to end all of them. You have to basically try to avoid them, or at least admit when you've got one. Also, you're committing to doing fundraising. 90+ percent of nonprofits need to fundraise. Some are foundations and don't need to, but you need to agree to fundraise. You need to agree to have loyalty. This is your primary function when you're sitting in this seat as a board member, that you're loyal to this organization. And there's more that you can put in a board agreement, but it does a lot of things in just one document. And you can use this now. Today, you're going to get a copy of this. You can literally adapt it to your nonprofit with a couple small tweaks and start using it tomorrow. Get your board to pass it and use it. So we talked about some board challenges early on, right? A little bit about orientation and boards being a mess. But there are some fundamental challenges that the board agreement is designed to address. The first of which is engagement, which we just talked about. I can't tell you how many people say, I wish my board would just show up, that they would respond to my emails, or that they would attend meetings, or that they would do the homework that they promised they would in between board meetings. This is very common. Follow through, reviewing materials. Executive directors send things to boards all the time, and then they're never actually looked at. It's really, it can really hurt your morale when you serve in a nonprofit to see that the leaders aren't really doing what they said they were going to do. And also fundraising. You can start feeling like you're alone as a staff when the board isn't fundraising. And what volunteers on the board are going to fundraise if they don't see everyone else on the board fundraising, right? It's a vicious cycle. I have this image there, boards being distracted on their cell phone right near a fast-moving train. So The other thing is self-interest, right? So boards are really made up, because they're made up of individuals and people and humans, they have interests. They have interests outside the organization. They have interests inside the organization. Some people join an organization for a board for the prestige. Some people join it for their resume. Some people join it for actual impact. Some people join it for all of the above, and there's nothing wrong with all of the above. But there can be conflicts of interest that arise, right? Like if I join a nonprofit organization so I can get my spouse a job, or I join this organization because I think it's going to help my business get a contract with this nonprofit, or I join this organization purely because I want to just meet people for my insurance company. These are things you want to avoid. So self-dealing is a smaller subset of conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest essentially aren't always bad. You just want to make sure that people are aware of them so that you don't vote. If that thing comes up, like, oh, I happen to know the printer that I'm bringing to the board to hire for our annual gala, I just won't discuss or vote on this, right? So you want to avoid conflicts of interest, but you might not be able to get away from all of them, especially if you're hyper-local organization or very specialized. You also want to avoid self-dealing. We talked about how boards can't be compensated. They can't get paid. They cannot be financially benefiting from this deal. There are ways to compensate board members to reimburse them for board meetings or travel, things like that. But it should not be a salary. It shouldn't be compensation. It shouldn't come as part of board service. So any kind of self-dealing at all is something you definitely want to avoid, both legally and for optics. So I'm going to talk about something here called social loafing. Some people are familiar with this. There's other words for this. There's other terms for social loafing, but this is a social science concept. This is something that has been observed in groups. What we mean by social loafing is the bigger the group gets, the lazier it gets. It's why people don't want to be in a study group or a work group in high school or college. There's a big joke, oh, if I'm put in a work group with 3 other students, I'm going to get stuck with all the work. The bigger the group gets, even if the group is 2 or 4 or 12, like a board, or a focus group or whatever, right? The larger the group gets, including 200 people walking around in town square, right in the middle of your small town, right? If something is going on in front of everyone, people tend to get lazy. If there's 200 people walking around in downtown and someone throws litter on the ground, people are going to walk right by it. Everyone's assuming someone else is going to pick it up or someone else is going to handle this, right? In smaller groups, we tend to think, oh, I can skip a board meeting because they're going to have quorum without me. If I just don't do this homework, someone else will pick up the slack. It is just a nature of how groups are. It's called social loafing, and there's other words for this, but essentially, the bigger the group gets, the more they get lazy. So if we know this about groups, if we know that this is just how groups are, you can actually work to undo it or interrupt it or stop it with a board agreement. Also, another board challenge is due diligence. Board members sometimes don't know enough about financials or the law or your program areas to ask tough questions, right? You want your board offering due diligence. They are the stewards of all of the dollars and the programs and your tax status. You want boards offering due diligence. You also need your board to exercise judgment, right? And too often, boards don't use the best judgment all the time, right? Like they're listening and maybe they're listening and checking their phone or thinking about dinner when they get home. You need them exercising good judgment, which is not just about removing themselves from conflicts of interest, but also really thinking, I am charged with achieving this organization's mission. I am charged with making sure I raise objections when I see things that are going wrong. I can't adhere to groupthink. I need to object when I actually see something I disagree with. All right, so the solution is a board agreement, right? So we've seen all these different challenges from a board. Agreements offer clarity in role, responsibilities, and deadlines. So you might be wondering, how does this have to do with fundraising, right? But because the board, we've already covered the fact that boards are responsible for fundraising, right? The board cannot, well, we'll get into this more in future slides, but you have to use this document when you are onboarding board members, retaining board members, and removing board members, because it becomes an enforcement vehicle for fundraising. So deadlines, responsibilities, clarity, and roles, all of these things are baked into a board agreement. It also helps you settle disputes, right? If someone's like, oh no, I swear I raised my $1,000 this year. Like, actually, no, you didn't because you haven't, whatever, right? So part of the tool of using a board agreement is getting the people off the board that aren't raising money. That's one way to raise money with it. But it also helps make sure you have the right people. It is a powerful tool for recruitment, retention, and removal, but also development. When I'm out there looking for people to join my board, this is to Chad's question and other people's question, it starts even before the fundraising begins. When I'm considering someone for the board, I put the board agreement right in front of them and say, hey, if you join our board, we don't have low standards for our board. We have high standards for our board. We talked about this. Here's a list of exactly what you're going to be expected to do. I can't tell you how many boards will resist fundraising because they say they were never told they needed to fundraise when they were brought on. So we're going to eliminate that problem with 60 to 70% of board excuses that they don't believe they were asked to fundraise when they joined the board. By putting a board agreement right in front of them and saying, here's what you're going to be expected to do. Attend 80% of our meetings. You need to look at the homework that we give you, and we need you to fundraise. And in exchange, we will offer board insurance. We will be transparent with the books, and we will also make sure you have access to the staff when you need that. So in recruitment, the board agreement is really, really powerful. This cannot be understated. Cannot be overstated, sorry, because recruitment of boards, if you have a horrible board right now, you can, within 12 months, you can use this to move some people out and other people in who are all going to adhere to this agreement. And within even 12 months, if boards entirely need to change over, everyone will be hopefully fundraising because you're enforcing this agreement. Also on retention, the board agreement is a great way to retain board members because everyone feels like they're part of a board that has high standards. I joined this board, I sit on this board because we all have a shared agreement that we're going to raise money, that we're going to resource the budget that we just passed. Boards can't just pass a budget and then be there for the spending part of it. They have to be there for the resourcing part of it. It's unethical to pass a budget and then only be there to spend it, not to help pay for the things you just passed, right? So retention has a critical part of retention is being able at the end of a board member's term to say, hey, you've honored your agreement, you can stick around, right? Retention is a fundamental thing. You want stability on your board, and board agreements are sort of like a glue that holds your good members in place. It strengthens the organization and therefore strengthens fundraising. You can also remove board members with a board agreement. If I go to Jack and say, hey, Jack, here are the things you need to do in the first 2 years when you're on our board. At the end of the first year, they haven't done half of them. Sometimes that board member decides to leave on their own. It removes the need to have these really difficult conversations. Hey, Jack, we need to talk. You're not really adhering to your board agreement. They know they're not adhering to it. By signing a board agreement, the sort of dead weight or the lazier board members or those who just can't do what they promised to do sometimes decide to leave on their own. This is a fundraising tactic. This is getting people out who aren't going to lead and step up. And I believe boards should be raising 10 to 20% of the budget. So when you can get people out that aren't doing that, you immediately make room for people who are going to help you raise 10 to 20% of the budget. And then development. The board agreement itself comes with an obligation. If the board is saying, yes, I agree, I'm going to go do these things, the staff then need to provide tools to the board for them to reach that goal. Today, we're also going to give you a sample board fundraising worksheet, which you give to the board and ask them to fill it out in order to honor the board agreement. So today, you're going to get 2 tools. To Chad's question and other folks who are wondering, how do I actually use this for fundraising? You'll get a sample board fundraising worksheet, which goes hand in hand with the board agreement, my 2 most powerful tools that I use. So the elements of the board agreement, real quick, are what we owe the public. So as a board member, I owe the public something. The IRS and the people of the United States have given us tax exemption. We don't have to pay income tax. That is powerful. There's things we have to give away in order to get that, right? We can't lobby too much, we can't endorse candidates, but basically we don't have to pay income tax. The other thing we owe the public is donations to us are tax deductible. There's like all of these different benefits we're getting. In exchange for that, we owe the public some things, right? As board members, we have a duty of obedience that we must be following the bylaws and the law and our rules and our policies. That's in the board agreement. We also have a duty of care, and that is the fundraising part. So this is a fundamental, this is corporate law in the United States, all 50 states, federal law, series of court decisions. Duty of care is the other part of this. I have to take care of this organization and provide for it. I need to be a good steward of its resources and make sure that the programs are monitored and that the programs are funded and our executive director is paid, right? I have to go raise money because this document reminds me I have legal obligations as a board member. We don't talk to our board members typically like this. And then finally, duty of loyalty. These are capitalized because these are actual things in the law. Duty of loyalty means when I'm sitting in this seat as a board member, I am loyal to this organization. I'm not thinking about my own interests or some other board that I'm on. I am loyal to this organization, to its mission. In addition to those things that we owe the public, we also owe it to the public, taxpayers, stakeholders to be ethical, to use sector best practices, and to make sure that the taxpayers are not subsidizing some kind of political work that we're doing, lobbying, electioneering. These are all things baked into a good board agreement. Now, what we owe the organization, right? As board members, we also owe not just the public, but this organization. We owe it to attend meetings, to actually do our assignments, to review materials when we're asked to do fundraising. This is the big part here, right? We have to insist that our board members raise a certain amount of money every year. Either the board collectively hits a certain amount, or each individual board member hits an amount, or you get these things donated in kind, but everyone has a fundraising goal. Leadership, being a good leader and ambassador for the nonprofit. Finally, that I am here to serve the mission. That's what my obligation to the organization is. And to avoid conflicts of interest, which is all in the board agreement, and to avoid self-dealing. Elements of a board agreement, this is the third part. What we owe our fellow board members. Transparency, that we're gonna get regular and accurate information, that when I ask to see the books, I'm gonna be able to see the books. Transparency in terms of the notice of meetings. You can't just have meetings without letting the board know. That should be in your bylaws, but it's also sort of law, so you need to have transparency. Put that in your board agreement also. You'll provide insurance to the board so that when they vote on things, they don't have to worry about getting sued individually. You'll provide staff support, and this also has to do with fundraising. If I have a staff of my nonprofit, I need to make them available to the board to help them hit their fundraising goals, right? And that includes many documents, having them write up a plan, having them show them ways they can sell tickets for the annual event, whatever it is. Also, you want to commit to confidentiality, whatever that means for your nonprofit. And also just basic respect, that people are not going to bully each other or be rude. You can have disagreements, that's healthy, but you don't want to have dysfunctional conflict. So, final notes. You are going to want to sign this document every single year or every single board term. You're going to update it every 1 to 2 years to make sure that the board agreement is still reflective of the organization. So we're going to I know like some folks wanted to know specifically how to use the board agreement with fundraising, so I'll add a couple final notes here. When you implement the board agreement with your full board, it normally comes with a give or get statement. And so a give or get statement, for those who are not familiar with it, this is the one sentence inside the document that says, you will raise this much money every year, or you might not be able to serve on the board, right? Having a give, get, or get off statement. This is like you have to give the money, you have to go get the money, or you have to get off the board. A give or get policy is fundamental to a board agreement. The board agreement, most of it doesn't work without the give or get policy inside, which again can be one sentence, and the one you're going to get today is going to give you that sentence. So just to recap, boards fundamentally need structure. Agreements are that structure, and they are powerful, and they can help you with recruiting, retaining, and removing better boards with higher standards. So you should all be very proud of yourself to get through this training, as we help people build alignment in their organization by implementing this board agreement. So now this first link to go get a free board agreement that I use with every organization I work with. It is the very tool that has gotten every board I've worked with to either say, yes, I'm going to sign this, and yes, I'm going to fundraise, but it does require enforcement. That's the one thing we didn't get a chance to talk too much about is accountability. The board chair should be the person enforcing this throughout the year. Sometimes it falls to the executive director, but it usually should be your board chair. So in a sample board agreement, it starts really simply with this organization has set out to implement structure in an agreement. There are fiscal responsibilities that come with board service, and it lays out a handful of very specific things that are fiscally important to board service. And then governance responsibilities, what things you need to do to actually honor your governing role, right? And then program oversight responsibilities. The board does need to make sure that the programs of the organization are operating. These are just basic board roles that are in here: ambassadorship, miscellaneous, and legal responsibilities. I think there's a tiny formatting thing here that's pushing this. Oh, here's the end of it. And then on the second part of the agreement is the actual thing you sign. So it basically reiterates some of the stuff at the top, and we've deliberately kept this extra E in there. I'll fix that while we're doing this in real time. The statement of agreement can include all of these bullets, and you can customize this for your organization. Here's the section 4. To actively participate in fundraising for the organization. As part of my fiscal obligation, I will work with the board chair and staff to develop a personal fundraising plan that allows me to raise money in the ways that are best suited for me. This can include a statement right in here that I will give something that is meaningful for me. I will raise a certain extra amount, and I will do what I can to create the conditions for financial and fundraising success. And there's a couple other sections in here that have to do with due diligence. And then at the bottom, you sign it. So functionally speaking, I will now pull away from this document.
So Sean, with number 4, would you ever get, well, I don't want to say super specific, but would you get specific in terms of, give or get, actual numbers? How would you handle that?
Yes. So you absolutely need to get specific. If you want your board members raising money, you can't just say, hey, just pitch in what you can. You can't do that. Basic human psychology says that if you want behavior change, if you want people to do, when I'm asking someone for money or asking my board to go get money, specifics matter. If I tell someone I'm coaching at the gym, go lose some weight, I'm not going to be as successful as if I say go lose 10 pounds. Specificity matters in behavior change. And if you give someone specifics like a goal, this whole board needs to collectively raise 20,000, or each individual board member needs to raise 2,000, right? Specifics give you an aim for where you need to go. And goals, specific goals, help you with roadmaps. It helps people all commit to it in front of each other. When everyone in the room is like, okay, I guess we're all signing this, we all have to raise 2,000, there is some accountability and peer pressure that is involved with this. So the key part of this entire document for the fundraising part is the clause 4, right? And this is baked in throughout the whole document, but you do need to have specifics. If your organization is resistant to specifics, you'll be less successful fundraising. If you want to ease into this over 18 months instead of 90 days, you can do that. But if you want rapid results, the whole board can look at this policy and say, yes, it's about time we have high standards for ourselves. We're going to go commit to implementing this within the next 90 days. Some organizations say we're going to implement this in 90 days or at the end of this calendar year to give people time. But some organizations implement this immediately and begin fundraising immediately. They just needed the help with the document.
Wonderful. I see that it says this may come as a one-time gift, an in-kind gift, or a regular recurring donation. I like that. I don't see, I wanted to talk about giving versus getting, if people, make people aware of that difference and maybe how you've handled it.
Yes, so I believe every organization is different. If you are made up of people in your organization who it is part of your organizational DNA that the people who built this organization have no money. Like, could be a group of immigrants from a certain country that formed a small nonprofit to accomplish a certain goal, and they have no money, right? There are very structural, specific, local, and small nonprofits that may not have the ability to give money, but I believe we need to be asking every board, but 90% of nonprofits, you can ask your board members to make a gift that is meaningful to you. For some people, a student, whoever, meaningful could be $5 or $50. For some people, meaningful is like $1,000. But I do believe that you need to be giving something, and here's why. One, if you're not invested in this organization financially, then why are you on the board? Be some other kind of volunteer, right? But you also, foundations might not give you money unless they see that you have 100% of your board giving money. So there's structural reasons across the sector for that. And then in terms of in-kind, if I can bring something to the organization that eliminates a line item, let's say we need office space or a printer or miles for air travel. If you can bring something to the organization that is in kind and eliminates a cost, that's the same as fundraising in my mind. So if someone comes to the organization and gets someone to make a gift of stock, or makes or introduces me to someone who then gives 10,000, you can count that sometimes. If you are making the introduction to the executive director and then the executive director or whoever raises the money, you could count that as actually going toward your goal. So each organization can customize this, but the board needs to be putting in some effort to raise this money for each individual board member.
And while we're on the page, since Anne just says, this agreement has a legal notice at the bottom stating that no part of it can be used, reproduced, etc. After today, do we have permission to use this language?
I do not want people on this training sharing it beyond your nonprofit. If you want to use this within your organization, modify it, remove that line, whatever. But if you begin to share it, it would be a violation of I charge for this document. I'm giving it away for free for everyone on this training. I'm a very small little business, and how I make my money is sometimes selling these. These are $9 on my website. They're super cheap. So I would encourage you to please not share it beyond your nonprofit, but within your nonprofit, feel free to remove this language, adopt it for yourself and use it, but just don't share it widely.
Thank you so much, Sean. I kind of hijacked a little bit. Were you going to show us the end? Sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, I want to make sure we have time for questions, but yeah.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
just like 2 other links: Board Source, great organization to grab information on board development. Boulder Advocacy is my favorite organization in case your organization needs to. We talked a little bit about electioneering and lobbying. If you want to learn all the ways your nonprofit can actually be involved in advocacy, Boulder Advocacy is a nonprofit I encourage folks to go connect with, and they have sample policies for you also, including sample bylaws, all that stuff. And then the other tool I wanted to give away for free today, which is a companion document for fundraising. These are my 2 power tools. The free board fundraising worksheet. If you go to that link, which hopefully you guys can drop in the chat, this link, you'll sign up, and signing up tells me you really want the tool. It's not just like I don't want these links all over the web for anyone to grab. I want to see if folks actually want this instrument, right? So if you grab that, you'll be signed up for my email. You don't have to stay on if you don't want to, but that's how you get the tool delivered to you. And this is a board fundraising worksheet. The fundamental basics of a fundraising worksheet is also psychological. Both of these 2 documents rely heavily on human psychology to know how groups work and know how human behavior works. We are more likely to adhere and reach goals versus just nebulous aims and aspirations. So having a goal, having a specific agreement that has words in it and amounts in it that I have to raise. The board fundraising worksheet puts a sheet right in front of each board member and says, hey, remember that board agreement you signed? Here's how you actually hit it. Here's how you raise the $2,000 you promised to raise this year, or the $500 you promised to raise this year. Here's the fundraising worksheet. By filling it out, they have to write out a plan. And people who write out plans are more likely to hit their goal. So I might say, I will do 1 house party, I will ask 6 friends for money, I will run 1 Facebook fundraiser, I will do, so you have to write out these different ways that you'll hit your $1,000 limit. So this document, also free today, combined with the board agreement, are the way to get your board to begin fundraising immediately. I also have a great blog post on my blog with over 100 ways that board members can raise money without soliciting money. without actually asking a friend or a family member or a stranger for money. Over 100 different ways that board members can help make fundraising dollars come in without direct solicitation. That's on my blog. I'll try to grab it during Q&A and put that in for you guys to share in the chat also. It's a really powerful way that goes along with the fundraising worksheet.
That sounds amazing. Is there any way we can kind of look at the fundraising worksheet, or is that taking us kind of,
Yeah,
can we do that?
I will go grab that.
I'll tell you now, Sean, when you and I were talking about doing this webinar, we had just done our board and fundraising class here at Candid, and people were like really upset. And by that I mean they felt so frustrated and just like at their wits' end in terms of, how do I get them to do this? And I
Right,
think part of the frustration is people feel very much, I think the power is in the wrong hands in terms of I just need a board. So if people realize I need you and I'll put up with kind of anything, then they'll do that. And they seem to find it really hard to change that dynamic.
right,
And, so we had the class and I felt like, oh, we're giving them great advice, but people just seem so like, I don't know if I can actually do any of this.
right,
And so when that's part of the reason why when we talked about, what can we talk about next? I
right.
figured boards because people are really frustrated. So yeah, I'd love to see kind of your plans because those real details, yeah, really, how do I get them to do this? What are the things I can give them? I thought it was really important to understand you can't just ask without any kind of tool for
Right.
them.
If you can see this, the Build a Rockstar Board course slide,
Hmm.
there's a link right here. People can take a screenshot of this and I'll also drop it in the chat. Um, I just want to let folks know about a full course that I have. It's like 5 to 6 hours of content. It covers everything. I give away like over 30 different downloads, and a huge chunk of the Build a Rockstar Board course is focused on fundraising and just building a really solid board. So there's just a link right there. That link does not take you directly to the course. That link takes you to a free training, a free webinar that I offer that talks about the members, the meetings, and the money in a slightly deeper context. And then you'll be given a limited time offer, like a 5-day offer to join the full course. If you don't want it, that's totally fine. But here's the best way to go learn more about the more robust course that I offer that we don't get too much into today. We only scratch the surface. And then the final slide for today is just letting folks know all the different services that I offer, everything from like training, consulting, coaching. I also help people with media training and crisis communications. There's my email. And then there's this link tree at the bottom, which is a link to all sorts of stuff, my social media channels, a bunch of other free tools that I give away, all of that stuff. Now, we're going to
And
walk
I
through.
can agree. Let me just interject that he really does have all his best stuff in that link. I think I was looking at a lot of things like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So yeah, if because there's some really great tools, and I think that I know that's what people are looking for. Like how exactly? Like we know some of this, but how do I get that kind of practical tool? And so yeah, and I would suggest taking the class if it's something you're really concerned about. That is a great thing to do with your professional development dollars or whatever it is, because we know how important it is. So thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah, the Board Rockstar course gets really, really high marks. I'm trying to open up this document now. It's just taking a couple seconds, but what we're going to do is through the board fundraising worksheet, which is my highest performing tool. I give this away for free online, but people sign up for this like crazy because they really are hungry for a specific tool to get their board to fundraise.
Hmm.
And let me it is Microsoft Word is doing its thing.
I
Uh,
see. While it's doing its thing, can I ask one of the questions we have?
sure.
So John Kelly said, for an existing nonprofit, would I be right in assuming that the board itself would need to approve the board agreement we'd want implemented?
Yes. The board agreement is passed by the board. It is for the board. It is only for board members to follow, and it is for board members to take seriously, so they should pass it with a vote. It isn't something you just kind of all talk about and then you never get back to it. It should be passed and voted on like a policy, like your non-discrimination policy, conflict of interest policy, document retention policy, which is required by law, and also a whistleblower policy. It's a couple that are required by law: conflict of interest, whistleblower, document retention. I think that this policy is the very next one. Having a give, the policy is a give or get, right? That is one little part of the board agreement. So the board passes and says, we are going to institute a board agreement, and then you begin using it and everyone signs it right there on the spot, or you take a month for everyone to review it and then you all come back and do it. It is scary, I'm not going to deny. Boards who have been allowed to have low standards for a while are going to resist. And this is part of the thing we need to get out of in our nonprofits, is the race to the bottom and accepting lower standards. Your board, sometimes people bring in consultants like me to convince the board they need to move in this direction. And every now and then you will lose a board member or two because they don't want to do the hard work. And I say, that's sad, but we're not here as a coffee klatch or for some community playground. We're here to change the world, and we need board members who are going to take this role seriously. If you can't fundraise, then let's move you into a different role in the nonprofit. Be on a board committee, be a volunteer, but board members own the nonprofit. They need to be responsible for revenue. And that's tough language, and people they bristle when they hear it, but if you don't do it, your organization will always have less money. Can you all see the board of directors fundraising work?
We can, and thank you for that response. I think people are somewhat, like I said, sometimes a little afraid of their board members just because they need them and they've asked them, and they just feel like there's not 100 people lined up at the door to be my board member. So now
Right.
what do I do? So I really appreciate that, because I think it's okay to have high standards, and that's a great way to put it. Let's have high standards. How can you argue?
The reason why I don't support, why I'm not a big believer in board term limits, I believe in board terms. Like, I get to serve 1 year or I serve 2 years, and every time that comes up, I serve again, or not. But I don't believe in term limits, right? I can only serve for 4 years or 6 years. And here's why. It is so hard to find good board members that when I find a good one, I'm not shoving them out. I'm not pushing them out at year 4 or year 6. If it's working, they're raising money, they're a great ambassador, they're showing up to meetings, I'm not moving them out. I know how hard it is to build a good board. So I do not believe in board term limits. I believe if they're doing their job and they're serving the organization, stay. That's controversial.
That is a really great piece, a little gem there, because I think people wouldn't normally think that way. So
right. So here's the board of directors agreement. Everyone's getting this for free today. Just sign up and then it'll be delivered to you within a few minutes to your inbox. In this document, again, this is heavily reliant on psychology. Having a written plan, anyone who has to write out, whether it's weight loss or stopping biting your nails, anytime you want behavior change, writing out a plan, visioning it, making it real makes it more likely to happen. This document starts with the premise right at the top that you're going to use this worksheet to fill this out to write an individual plan. I believe you should give this to every board member, and you should all be discussing it during a board meeting, whether in person or online. Everyone in real time. This is where the peer pressure comes in. Everyone's right there, the document's right in front of you, and you all have to fill it out on the spot and send it in to the board chair or the executive director by the end of the board meeting. That's pressure, right? You are more likely to get this document in if everyone has a deadline, like right in front of everyone else. And you're more likely to adhere to the things on this document if you submitted it along with everyone else. There's peer pressure elements to this. So here you can see it says fundraising plan for, you add the board member's name, best contact method for that board member is wherever. I have committed to raising, let's say $500 each year that I serve on the board of directors. As a member of the board of directors, I will fulfill my commitment in the following ways. And I have constructed a list here for them to choose from, but you can choose anything you can erase all these and put your own stuff in. I will personally contribute X dollars. Could be 50 bucks a month, whatever. Number 2, I will secure X number of new donors to the organization with a minimum of 10 new members being at least $25 or $50 or whatever, right? I will do a mailing. I will mail 10 people on my list or 20 people. Mailings work if you're just going to send handwritten letters to friends and family. I will, and you can say it, this is the number of contacts I'm going to mail to. Number 3, I will secure X number of people to attend our annual fundraising event. Number 4, I will introduce the staff to 6 people that they can solicit for money. And then list the names right there in the document. What dates are you going to make these introductions, right? What is the monetary goal? Do I think I can raise 500 this way or 1,000 this way? The goal of the fundraising worksheet, I want everyone to hear me loud and clear here. The goal of this document and the goal of the board agreement is not to say you must hit this goal of 2,000 or 500, or we're going to throw you out. That is not the goal. The goal isn't to push out good people that are trying hard. You are going to find board members who have a rough year, who don't hit their goal, but I guarantee you, your board members are going to try a lot harder with a board agreement than without one. And if your board members are all trying and they all hit 80% of their goals, you're going to be way ahead of where you were last year. You can decide as a board, everyone looks like they're just kicking butt, right? We're going to let them off the hook this year because it was our first year implementing it. But next year, let's go for 95% of our goal, right? The goal of this thing is not to be a hardline enforcer. It is to begin building money for your organization and having high standards. So here on number 6, I will host a dinner party. Some of these can even be online. You can do like a virtual or no-show event where no one actually has to come, but they just pledge an amount. I will approach my employer about a gift, number 7. Number 8, I will offset items in the organizational budget, travel, printing, legal fees, an office, whatever, with an in-kind contribution. I will, if you bring something in the form of an in-kind contribution that doesn't actually offset an expense, I don't think that counts. It's helpful, but it doesn't count toward the give-get goal. The executive director is like, thanks for all these clothing. We don't really use clothing here, but thanks for this. You know, like you need to bring something that's actually able to be liquidated and turned into cash, or something that is going to offset an expenditure, right? Anything above and beyond is helpful, but it doesn't really count toward your give or get goal unless it actually can be cash for the organization to save or raise. And then number 9, I will approach the producers of non-fundraising events like the Jazz Festival or whatever happening locally to see if we can become a recipient or a community partner or whatever, right? And then there's just more things in here. Then number 10, I will go get gift cards from local community or businesses. I will get the remaining amount by this date. Number 12, I will host an online event to raise money for the organization. I can create a giving circle. I'm a big fan of Facebook fundraisers. Creating a Facebook fundraiser is free. There are no fees. You can raise money quickly. I have a course on how to do that. I have a free tool on my website on how to do that. And so there are so many ways to go out and get this money. And once board members see that there is a roadmap, oh, I could do that. I didn't know I could do that. I could get someone to donate a car and get that liquidated into cash. Oh my God, I've hit my fundraising goal with just one Facebook fundraiser, right? There are so many ways to get this money in the door. All of a sudden, the board agreement seems like, oh, this is less scary. I have a roadmap. This document is your roadmap.
Thank you so much. That is amazing. And I think that's definitely something that people will appreciate. And now, after I made you do all of that, we have questions as well. So Marianne wanted to know, can Sean talk a little bit about who walks through the board agreement with board members? Is it the board chair? Is it the ED? And then how is the director of development looped in?
Actually, if you can let me share my screen one more time, I'm going to show people a blog post. If you go to my website, nonprofitfixer.com, this blog post here, the big list of 100+ nonprofit board fundraising tasks, this is free. You can go look at this on my website. I compiled 100 ways for your board to go get money that doesn't involve directly asking someone for money. If you can believe it, 100+ ways to go do this. So there's no excuse for board members to not be trying. They must really not want to go find money for this nonprofit if they don't want to do anything on this list, right? Then you have to ask yourself, is this person really a good board member, or are they really fit to be another kind of role in the organization, volunteer, board committee? But if you're not willing to do this work, I strongly encourage you to assess if board leadership is the right role. So anyway, you had a question. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, so the question was, who's walking them through the board agreement? Is it the board chair? Is it the ED? Or is it the director of development?
So it can be anyone. In a perfect world, and this is what I cover in the full board course, in a perfect world, you would have an awesome chair. The chair runs the board. The executive director works for the board. It's a partnership, but essentially the executive director is an employee of the board. So the board chair needs to govern the rest of the board. So the board chair should be the person saying, hey, everyone, here's this thing. I really strongly encourage we review this, talk it out, assess our fears, and begin immediately implementing this board agreement. It's scary. We're all going to have to step up. If we don't hit it in the first year, that's okay. We're just practicing. We're trying. But the board chair should be that leader. If you don't think your chair can make a good sell, right, then you might lean on another board member to make that sell, right? Just coordinate it with the chair so they don't feel usurped. And then if that doesn't work, then have the ED do it. Have the executive director do it. I would not have the development director do it unless all those other options are exhausted. If your organization is even lucky enough to have a development director. By the time you have a development director, your board pretty much already knows it's supposed to have some kind of role in fundraising. But yes, you could have the board chair or some other charismatic board member who people trust and like, or the executive director, and then last case scenario would be the development director.
Gotcha. Well, I'm getting this question in a few different ways. Darcy, I want to say a few people are asking, can the number be different for specific board members? Example, we have 1 or 2 board members who don't have the capacity to give and perhaps not the network, but they bring thought leadership. So, and then we had the question, how about if they can't afford to give, what we're asking? So yeah, I guess, can the number be different for certain board members?
So this is going to be very unpopular. People are going to think this response is a little flip or rude or even classist, and I don't want to front load all that, but I am a big believer that every board member can give something, and to say that some board members can give, some can't, we can't make decisions for people about whether they can give or not. Let's let them decide whether they can give or not. So I'll just put that out there as a disclaimer. Having said that, because I think we make assumptions that people are low on cash or whatever. We have no idea what people are doing in private, right, with their cash, right? So we make assumptions that people are low income or low wealth and therefore can't donate. So one, let's not make that assumption. But if you have a board member that is telling you, I cannot afford any donation, $5, $50, I cannot afford anything, then the risk you run with having different amounts for every organizational board member is that people could feel icky about that, right? Steve over there only has to raise $5, only has to give $5, and I have to give a lot more. So the give part of the policy is up to each individual board member. I stress, I want everyone to give something that is meaningful for them. If you're broke and you're a student or whatever your life situation is, and $5 is a meaningful gift for you, you're good. I never set limits for giving. So not everyone on the board doesn't have to give the same amount, but the get amount is pretty important to have it be consistent. So I don't require that everyone give the same amount or a percentage of their income or anything like that. It's divisive and rude or whatever. But every individual board member should be aiming toward a unified goal. A unified goal could be we all have to raise $1,000 each, or as a board, we all have to raise $15,000, right? So that way, if you have a wealthy board member and a not so wealthy board member, and they're both on the board, they can all work together and say, hey, I don't know all the people that you know. but I do know someone, I might be kind of broke, right? But I have a friend who's on the board of this foundation, so I can still raise as much as you can give, right? You just never know what people are capable of. But if the board has a collective goal, we will raise 15,000 this year, or each individual board member raises 1,000, then there's all these different avenues to that. But I would never require that everyone give the same amount.
Great. That is a really great answer, actually, because that's what they're wondering about. Leah said, when you say the board should raise 10 to 20% of the budget, is that above and beyond board dues?
When I think of dues, I think of membership. And membership organizations, that's like a legal distinction, like literally calling your donors and supporters a member is a legal thing in your state and a thing in your bylaws. Membership gives you certain privileges like voting for the board, all sorts of stuff. So when I think of dues, I think of membership. If that's not what this person means and they're just saying, hey, it's a contribution, board contributions, I don't really know the structure of your organization,
Yeah,
but
it's funny. She did come back and say, by board dues, I mean the give or get.
okay. Yeah, I mean, if your board procures in any way from a cash donation, in kind, or goes out and raises it or introduces the ED to someone who can give you $1 million, however they marshal that money and can take credit for it, it counts. So you just have to work that out. The bumps happen over time. You don't want to double dip. If Steve introduces a millionaire to the ED, but Jack also knew this millionaire, who gets credit, right? You just got to work that stuff out over time. But essentially, all dollars, as an executive director myself, I keep a tracking document. My board member, Sally, she just made this introduction happen. We got $500,000 out of it or whatever it is. I'm going to put this toward her give get, right? But you do keep track of it all, and it's not science, it's a little bit more art, but you do basically have some standards. But if your board members each procure, let's say $1,000 each, and that's the give or get, they've hit it, right? You just got to decide. And some people are going to go way above their limit. Some people are going to raise 10 times what they need to. I've seen that happen with Facebook fundraisers or a cash when they get a bonus at work and they just liquidate some stock. People do all the time give more than they need to, and some people are going to give less, and it kind of evens out.
Okay. Jonathan wants to know, what is the average amount of people you have found nonprofits have to ask in order to find a board member that meets the standard? We just got turned down by the last 3 people we asked because they didn't have time to meet the obligations. Is there an average of 5 asks for 1 yes or something like that? Any tips on presenting the agreement to prospective board members?
I just realized that the last question, I'll answer that in a second. The last question, I don't think I fully answered it about the 10 to 20%.
Okay.
In general, organizations that are under $2 or $3 million, which is the vast majority of nonprofits, I believe the board should be raising 10 to 20% of that amount. If you start getting really large and you have a development staff, the number starts to shift. So the 10 to 20% of the budget should be brought in by this give or get policy. The give or get policy helps you get to that 10 or 20% of the full revenue for the organization. In terms of the last question that someone just asked, there's no science here, there's no bell curve. If you're asking a lot of people to join your board and a bunch of them are saying no, either there's something wrong with your approach, there might be something wrong with your organization, or the pool of people you're going to aren't the right pool of people, right? So I would just say to yourself, we talked about strategy earlier. What is your strategy? I used to run the Tyler Clementi Foundation, and we were a national bullying prevention organization. We had bullying prevention tools that you could download for free off the internet. We decided that as a strategy, we wanted to make sure that we were putting people on our board that helped us reach our mission. Ahead of diversity by race, skill set, geography, or rich people, that wasn't our strategy. Our strategy was first and foremost, who will help us reach our mission? Then, as a secondary characteristic, diversity, equity, skill set, all that stuff. And so we asked someone who was a major education leader around the country if they would join our board, because they could get us into 1.7 million schools, 1.7 million teachers' hands, in many hundreds of thousands of schools. And this person said yes, and it was pretty amazing. So you can set out a strategy. Who is going to help us reach our mission? And then select from a list of people from your board, who those people are, and go approach them. But if you're getting consistently people saying no, it might be because what they're expected to do on the board is too tough. Maybe the organization has some reputational challenges. I don't know your organization, but I don't really know. But there is no magic number of asks. Like in fundraising, there are formulas for how many asks to how many yeses, but in asking someone to join your board, I don't think there's any such formula.
Wow, thanks so much. Tracy wants to know who holds the board accountable. So we give them this board agreement. We have this fundraising worksheet. All of this is going on. Who holds them accountable? The board president or the executive director?
The chair, the board president, board chair. Hands down, this is a group of people who own the nonprofit. They appoint or vote on a chair. That chair is the leader structurally, and under law, the chair, the board has certain rules they have to follow. And so the board is held accountable to like the officers and specifically the chair or the president. If they fail in their duties, they are then held accountable by the attorney general, or your stakeholders. So if you break the law or empty the coffers and put it in your own pocket, you can be sued or shut down. Foundations have this happen to them. So the ultimate accountability is the people. But the first line of defense is your chair. And if you don't have a strong chair or someone willing to learn, study, and become that leader, you can rotate this responsibility or groom a new chair. It's exhausting work. It's not ideal, but this is the mess of how our boards are. There's all these volunteers, right? So you want a strong board chair, and the ultimate prize in nonprofits is to have a really effective chair.
Thank you so much. So I guess the final question, it's so hard to pick a final question because I kind of want you to wrap everything up, but the question is probably not going to make you do that. So I guess you can answer and then also maybe wrap things up for us. How do we implement the fundraising piece if we haven't asked our board to do that up to this point? Asked Lauren.
So when I say that you can do this in 90 days, it is ambitious, but my clients do it. My clients do it because I work with them to do it. I provide an added nudge because they're paying me, right? So we're paying this consultant. We're going to do this as fast as we possibly can. The way you do this is, let's say you've got a board. 60% of the folks here said they had a board that was like, so what you need to do is have a trusted voice in the organization, whether that's the ED, the chair, the vice chair, whoever the trusted sort of charismatic leader is, and say, we have a mission to achieve and we have big things we want for this world. And we, in order to have those things, the resources for our staff, our programs to be successful, in order to have all that, our board needs to step up. I believe the most fundamental part of board leadership is actually honoring our commitments. We have a duty of obedience, duty of care, and duty of, I'm forgetting the third duty right now all of a sudden, but those obedience, care, and loyalty. We have these fundamental duties under law, and I think the best way to help honor that is a board agreement. Let's pass this board agreement. Let's read it, tweak it, let's pass it, and then let's begin building out a plan for how we will collectively raise 10% of the organization's budget on year one, and maybe 12% of the organization's budget on year two, and then ultimately, so it's like this stepped thing. But within 90 days, you can get a board passing this and beginning to implement that board fundraising worksheet, and you are off and running. Some people take the initiative right out of the gate to go get their money and their give-get policy passed immediately because they don't want it hanging around their shoulders or around their neck the rest of the year, right? So these are some of the ways you can do that.
Thank you so much. That is actually a great way to wrap it up. And just final comment from Jonathan. This is a great presentation and discussion. So thank you so much, Sean. We really appreciate all of the tools. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Sean.
Thank you.